influence in Washington. But at the same time, we really do need a strong defense base. So, how do we square the circle? Here are two friends of our show who have thought about this a lot. And even though they're...
Let's back it up all the way. Right to
policy
the
challenge here. We should be skeptical of the military-industrial complex and all its corrupt influence in Washington. But at the same time, we really do need a strong defense base. So, how do we square the circle? Here are two friends of our show who have thought about this a lot. And even though they're on different sides of the political divide, may actually agree on some of the answers. Former Defense Department official and author of The Strategy of Denial, Elbridge Colby, along with American Economic Liberties Project Director of Research and the author of Goliath, Matt Stoller. Great to see you both. Bridge, what do you think about this? How do we get the strong defense base we need, but not just feed this giant military-industrial complex that is clearly so corrupt, inefficient in many ways?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Stephen. I mean, it's not just us saying it. The Fleet Forces Commander, the head of the Navy, sort of apparatus, said the other day, castigated a bunch of industry officials for not coming through fast enough. Our submarines are not being maintained. And bear in mind, we pay already 3.5% of our GDP roughly on defense. But here's the fact, as you put it rightly, we're facing for the first time in a century plus a near-peer adversary. And look, we're running out of key munitions, even in what would be a much smaller war in Ukraine. God forbid there's a war over Taiwan, or much more broadly, we're going to need to be prepared for a long war of attrition with China. And for that, we need a really capable defense industrial base. But I think just spending more money and doing the same kind of things is not going to lead to it. And, again, don't take it from us. Take it from senior military officials who are saying the same thing.
Matt, you've been on this.
And not only are they being wasteful, not only is it poor leadership pertaining to our national defense, but in reality, in everything that they have done, from illegal immigrants all the way from releasing our oil reserves in case there ever was a real military invasion or attack from our adversaries. I've never seen the stupidity like it is right now. But then again, you got somebody such as myself that's been a one-man pony show now for 30 plus years, that the churches still talk about the Antichrist, talk about the one world government, talk about the New World Order, talk about the two witnesses and the false prophet and the actual Antichrist pertaining to the opening of the fourth seal, the pale horseman. But yet, no, I don't have no supporters. I don't have no support team. I don't have a congregation. So what you have here is basically a bunch of BS whenever it comes to a bunch of people. And, I have asked this several different times, and I'm pretty sure in my lifetime I'll ask it some more times. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to the American regime that one day, whenever the enemy, not only from within, but the enemy abroad, winds up taking this great nation over? Are we even going to be remembered as a group of people that fought for its independence in 1776? Are we even going to be remembered towards the things that our ancestors has fought and died for? I mean, I don't know, because we are reaching so many different pivotal points. I mean, I didn't realize that there's already been something like, this is like the 20th day, 21st day or whatever of January, and I didn't realize that we're doubling right now in mass shootings. Of course, we just about doubled last year. Same thing. Almost doubled last year, over 600 mass shootings last year. So the rate that we're going this year, we're going to double. We're going to double if we continue on with the mass shootings like the statistics has already said, which I think is 4 more people that has to be killed in the process of one particular shooter. We're going to exceed even that in which what we done last year. We don't want to listen and live a righteous, holy life. We want to bellyache about Roe versus Wade at the 50th year anniversary, towards basically trying to demonize the move that the Supreme Court done in trying to put it on a statehood. You know, to see a mass murder like we've seen in the existences of the 50th anniversary, it's like a slap in the face, really, with a bloody rag, towards saying, okay, if you're going to kill all these innocent unborn children, why not allow for a mass shooter to go on a rampage? What's the difference in killing an unborn child versus killing a human being that's already a human being or a grown human being? What's the difference? Death is death in the eyes of God. And that's exactly what America's been doing. But then, what to top it off, pertaining to our national security, is that we'll spend billions and billions of dollars and giving it to another country, in which I don't have a problem in doing that. I really don't, because I feel like that the Ukrainians should be able to defend themselves, especially them fighting for their democracy. But yet, no, we're not going to prevent or stop the illegal immigrants from coming over to this country. Or we're not going to actually take care of our own, pertaining to those that are truly in jeopardy or are in peril right now. So whenever I ask the question, what's going to happen to us, I mean that literally, not figuratively, but literally. What's going to happen to us on down the road if something like they're talking about actually does occur? And I promise you, I am totally against war, against bloodshed, against any type of major confrontation that will lead to a bloodbath. But at the same time, I'm an American. I know that I've got cousins, I've got nephews, I've got nieces, I've got other loved ones, I've got friends that live here. What's going to happen to them whenever God calls us home? And what are they going to have to face whenever we're all gone? Somebody's going to have to speak for the speechless. Somebody is going to have to speak out pertaining to how that this government is no longer functioning as a self-serving entity for its own people. Whenever we're $32 trillion in debt now, and all our jails is full, somebody is going to have to give an account towards the damages that has been done in the past. I used to say 30 more years. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take it on up to 40, because this is 2023, and if you go back from 23 to 83, that's 40 years. I'm just going to take it back to 40 years of where we have gone as a society here in America in the past 40 plus years. What's going to happen to us? What is going to happen to the American people, as well as the American soil that we all stand on this side of the continent, on this side of the equator? What's going to happen to us? I don't know. And I don't think nobody else can answer that question, because of a left turn that should have been a right turn, going back into the Reagan and the Bush era.
Matt, you've been on this for years, and you've written so clearly and frighteningly, frankly, about the total kind of collapse of our the manufacturing component of our defense base. How do you see this?
Yeah, so in World War II, we had roughly a dozen contractors for every major weapon system. So if one couldn't do it, they had 11 other options, the procurement officer, and they had bargaining power, and so ensured quality and the ability to actually produce what we needed. And that sort of slowly shrank until the 1990s. We still had 100 prime contractors, and then the Clinton administration consolidated them into 5. And we have 5 prime contractors now who essentially have our price
price givers to the government, and it's incredibly inefficient. So when a contracting officer goes out and says we need whatever it is, a Javelin missiles or fighting vehicles, whatever they're looking for, there's only one, maybe two companies that can actually deliver it. So if they can't do it, you're kind of out of luck. And there are companies that specialize in buying up specific subcontractors who monopolize key aerospace parts and just raise prices. So this is an industry that needs a serious dose of competition.
It's so interesting.
I want to weigh in on this real quick. This come to my mind. You know, here I am at 61 years old. Obviously, the church world that claimed that they was the church world, they didn't want to support a ministry in defeating the enemy. They didn't want to support a ministry in bringing forth true, godly utopia and peace. So now what is this government thinking? Are they thinking that my son is going to step into the picture towards volunteering and putting him in the same position that I've relentlessly been in for the past 30 plus years, towards going through all the sufferings and being ridiculed and banged up and bruised up and being mocked and made fun of and denied? Is this what they plan on doing? Because I wouldn't wish this upon anybody, much less my son, in taking my place towards the ridiculation and the persecution that I have went through as being the founder of the Windmill Ministries. I wouldn't wish this upon nobody. So I don't know what this government's going to do. I know what this government has done. I know what this government has tried to do with people such as myself. I know the inadequacies of everything that's been going on now for the past few years towards allowing for all these different cultures to come over here to America and basically dominate our mainstream thinking towards who we really are and what we are. This is what happens whenever you have people that's working in the government more so for themselves than they are for we the people. I mean, they want to go back to the reflection point of January the 6th 2 years ago. January the 6th. Okay, January the 6th. That was a group of people that was obviously disappointed in our government strategies. It was a group of people that obviously did not agree with the government strategies. It was a group of people that said that they was not going to render or honor or accept their own government's rhetoric that their own government was putting out. I don't agree with their strategy. I don't agree with what they done January the 6th 2 years ago. But at the same time, I can sit and look and see their point of view in how that they was willing to raise teetotal hell with somebody towards trying to get their point across. And I guess even to this day, the point is still not fully across pertaining to our national security that has been jeopardized. And it didn't just start being jeopardized yesterday or 2 years ago pertaining to January the 6th. This has been an ongoing event pertaining to the crooks and the dishonest people over here in America. And it spread abroad pertaining to the greed of the oil petroleum tycoons out there that obviously wasn't going to accept the fact of global warming. And now this has spread abroad over here with the climate deniers and the election deniers and basically the Bible deniers. They claim that they have a belief in a hereafter. They claim that they believe in the forecasting or the prophecies of the Bible pertaining to the one world government, the new world order, the false prophet, the Antichrist, the two witnesses, etc., etc., etc. But yet now, whenever it comes time for them to actually roll up their sleeves, I have not seen the American people or let me rephrase that. I have not seen the American churches roll up their sleeves for 30 plus years. So what's going to convince me that after I'm dead and gone, because my clock's ticking too. I'm still in a mortal fleshly body here. What's going to happen after I'm gone? What's going to happen with the position that I've held so dearly for the past 30 plus years, even at the point of basically execution? They've executed my freedom. They've executed my name, character assassination. They've executed me being able to work in the in the public, with the public and for the public. So what's going to happen to us? I mean, whenever I ask that question, I'm really serious. What in the world is going to happen to the American establishment that got established in 1776? That's the $64,000 question that I don't think nobody in the White House or even in the military can answer right now, much less the church sector or the so-called church sector that has got us in this trouble that we're in right now. It wasn't the heathen. It wasn't the tramp or the hobo. It wasn't somebody that didn't have a sense of belief that crucified Jesus. It was the believers that turned their back on the Lord. Just like it was the believers that turned their back on me. They turned their back on the Windmill Ministries missions because they either thought that I was a lunatic, or they thought that I was a liar, or that I was just conjuring all this stuff up towards trying to gain some sort of publicity, like it was a publicity stunt, that I was a publicity hound. That's how they approached the individual that's talking to you right now, which is the founder of the Windmill Ministries. And regardless whether the Windmill Ministries ever sprouts wings and flies like all the rest of the ministries out here does, regardless whether it be A to B, A to Z, you can't deny the fact that in all of my work, over half of my life, I have been an advocate and spread material around in the name of the Windmill Ministries missions. Nobody can deny that because I've got proof of that through the steps and the work that I've put out to the general public that haven't gotten absolutely no support whatsoever on. Oh, I'm sure a few of them, they still talk about peace. Well, we don't want bad things to happen. We don't want rapes. We don't want war. We don't want disease. We don't want this country to go to nothing. But yet, no, they're still sitting around with their hands under their hips. I've never seen a group of people that was so lukewarm, so full of hypocrisy as I have for the past 30 some odd years in trying to rally a group of people that says one thing, but in reality does just the very opposite. And it's absolutely sickening. And whenever I see things like happened today or within the past 24 hours of a major mass shooter going on the fringes the way that he did, I'm thinking to myself, well, they kind of brought it upon themselves. I mean, they say one thing, they do another. They put all these military magazine, high advanced military armory guns out there. What was they thinking whenever they was doing what they was doing? And I'm sure from the hereafter life, regardless whether you want to call them aliens or you want to call them unidentified flying objects or you want to call them evil demonic spirits or you want to call them angels, I'm sure in the hereafter life they're all scratching their heads asking the same question. What the hell are they thinking?
This conversation never happens. It's just the sort of blunt and somewhat dumb conversation about, are you putting up defense spending or not how you do it, let alone the structure of the industry. I had no idea that the administration, the Clinton administration, actually engineered this. Can you also talk, Matt, about how much of the defense manufacturing base has gone overseas, and including to China?
Yeah, so part of this, and this was done in a bipartisan way, right? So there was a Republican Congress and a Democratic administration. They also lifted a whole series of controls on government procurement. So for example, there was intense knowledge that the Defense Department and the government had over how our weapons were produced. And when they lifted, and this was done under sort of reinventing government, but when they lifted controls on contracting, specifically defense contracting, then all of a sudden, companies could manufacture offshore, and it was no longer a big deal. And in some cases, contracting officers had no right to actually see how weapons were produced. And there were all sorts of loopholes and ways that they did this. But fundamentally, this was done at a moment where we thought, oh, America will never be challenged. We're this dominant power. Yeah. And so we got rid of all of these controls that we had to make sure that we could produce the things that we need, and so now we can't.
And it's not just weaponry. I get it pertaining to Walmart leaning towards the third world countries in the past 30 plus years, especially since Sam Walton has died, in bringing manufacturing TVs over to America cheaper than what our labor force could basically build and put on the shelves to the American people at a lower price. I get it that we was stonewalled by all the third world countries pertaining to their cheap labor rate. I get it. But what I don't get is how in the world can a group of people that claims that they care about one another divert all their attention in the medical industry towards allowing for China to basically be 92 to 95% of our primary producer pertaining to all medical stuff as well as medication. And to think that if we was to get in hock or in trouble with that great nation, do you think that they're going to continue to keep sending us diabetic medication? Do you think that they're going to continue to keep sending us other types of medication? Do you think that they're going to continue to keep manufacturing different machines and bringing them over here and letting us use them for our benefit? I kind of doubt it. We are walking ourselves off into a corner right now that we may be the greatest, strongest nation in the world. But whenever you have everybody and their brother coming up against you, and you're being inundated by all these illegals, and you're $32+ trillion in debt, and you have all these other problems pertaining to drugs and guns and education skills that has dropped the way that it has here in America, and all the above, you are cornering yourself into a corner that you're not going to be able to restrain or fight your way out. And you don't think that our adversaries can sit back and look at that and scratch their head and say, ha. So Brezhnev, the whole Russian, Yugoslavia, USSR leader was right. We will take the American people over and never fire a shot, but we will take them over from within. And that's exactly what is occurring. Now you wonder about the January 6th deal. What is coming up in the Americans' future? If we don't watch, the January 6th deal will look like kindergartners compared to what could actually occur over here in America, especially if we keep poking the bear over there in Russia that's already wounded, that this whole thing could blow up in the face of the American people, and we would have no one to blame other than ourselves. Oh, I'm sure we're going to try, the Democrats is going to try to blame the Republicans are going to try to blame the Democrats, but that can only go so far whenever you have massive bloodshed on the streets. When you have massive anarchy pertaining to people getting sick and dying because you cannot no longer produce the medication and the help for your own citizens, that strategy towards blaming one another will only go so far. And then after that, reality sinks in. But in the form of reality, our enemy may absolutely be not just ravaging us again and again and again. And whenever I talk about our enemy, I'm just not talking about a physical enemy. I'm talking about an emotional enemy. I'm talking about a financial enemy. I'm talking about a economical enemy. I'm talking about a forces of nature enemy. I'm talking about an enemy in general that somebody was blindsided going back 40 years ago that has jeopardized the lives and the safety of the American people. It's just been less than a week ago that T-Mobile announced that they was hacked. About 2 weeks ago, I think about 2 weeks before Christmas, over 30 million people's identification got stolen. Now, they claimed that nobody's social security number gets stolen. They claim this, they claim that, but yet no, they claim that it was a breach. How come these major mega companies that we spend all this money towards can no longer protect the American people? What has happened to our security? What has happened to common sense strategy? What has happened is what we're going to be asking ourselves after America, after our forefathers and our ancestors pertaining to all the suffering and pain, and after our American regime basically falls to the ground pertaining to Old Glory. We're going to all be scratching our heads saying, what in the world happened? What happened? Well, I'm going to tell you what happened. Negligence, number one. Greed, number two. And lukewarm Christianity strategies is what is going to be the three components that's going to bring the American flag, Old Glory, down to the ground, while the rest of us is scratching our heads wondering what the hell happened. Well, I'm going to tell you what happened. The world's worst is what happened. Our worst dynamic nightmare is basically like a storm brewing that we can see the thunder and the lightning. We can see the storm coming over the horizon. But we still don't get good sound judgment pertaining to leadership. Regardless whether it be in our defense, regardless whether it be in our medical supplies, regardless whether it be in using up our reserve oil, regardless whether it be this, regardless whether it be that. And now this is all led into a group of people that claim that they was smart because they could read a word and spell it correctly with 27 syllables to it, but yet now they didn't know really what the meaning of the word was. That now has led us down this endless road of all these forces of nature acting the way that they're doing, of draining all the oil out of the ground, and now we're all going to suffer the consequences on account of it. But yet, no, they want to degrade me. They want to demoralize me. They want to dehumanize me. And they want to still continue to reject me. And I'm talking about the adult baby boomer society over here in America that has brought this upon to us. In one form or the fashion, beginning with the assassination of Kennedy, all the way to the hippies, to the yippies, to the Woodstocks, to you name it, of giving everything away to all these other countries. I get it about the colored flat screen TVs and other components that we rely solely upon cheap labor in third world countries of manufacturing it, bringing it to us, and putting it on our shelves. I get it. But there's certain things that I don't get whenever it comes to our true safety and our livelihoods and our ability to survive as a group, as a whole, as a nation. And I for darn sure don't get that since I have walked out with social media platform in putting out my message either on YouTube or Facebook or both, that still to this day don't have an actual active support membership team in Behind the Windmill Ministries missions. You can fancy it up all you want. You can say, oh, we support him symbolically. You can use all these big fancy words. Oh, we pray for him. Oh, we do this. Oh, we do that. In other words, you're silent witnessers, kind of like the person that claims that he or her is a Christian because they got this bracelet or they wear a necklace that's got a cross on it, but yet now they live like the devil. Absolutely live like the devil. And you wonder how come that we're witnessing mass shootings that now has already exceeded over 45, the way that I understood the statistics this morning listening to the news, that there's already been 45 plus mass shootings this year alone, and we're right now at around the 21st day. So yeah, we're doubling as of right now in actuality towards the days. If we continue where we're going right now, on the pace that we're going right now, that means that the number 600 will be more like 700 or maybe even 750. Who knows? It may actually even jump to 800 mass shootings. And in those mass shootings, you don't know, because they declare a mass shooting as of 4 or more. You can't judge the actual appearances of how many deaths it's going to be pertaining to the carnage until the death has actually occurred, and you tally it up all at the end of the year. That could be the differences between 2,000 versus the span of maybe 6,000. The differences between, because you don't know what type of mass shooting it's going to be. I mean, if you have a constant mass shooting like we had today, 10 plus people that died, well, you do the math, 100 days from now, and then times that times 3, you pretty well get an idea towards how many people the carnage towards how many people would actually be dead just within a year's time. The way that we're going right now, if each shooting was 10 or more people that died. I'm not a smart man. I didn't graduate. I was a dropout in school. I got convictions pertaining to the supernatural that has affected my life in trying to help society, that obviously society don't want help, because every time that I've stood up, just about every time, I have got punished, degraded, demoralized, ridiculed, made fun of, and rejected. But once more, this will only go so far. My lifespan will only allow for me to live in my bruised up, cut up, butchered up body, broken up body that I've been living in now for 61 years, soon to be 62 years come this March. It will only allow for me to live in this body for a certain length of time. And then after I'm gone, I'm gone. Who's going to be the next candidate that's going to stand up, that is going to allow for themselves to be bruised, belittled, broken, torn, laughed at, balked at, demoralized, and demonized for half the span of their lifetime, and basically not getting nothing done but fighting their own fellow man. Who's going to be the next, and I hate to use the terminology of the fool, but who's going to be the next fool that's going to take my place? Who's going to be my predecessor that's going to take my position towards standing up and telling people about the first seal in the book of Revelations being open? That obviously white man said one thing, but white man done just the opposite pertaining to the split tongue. There's no other creature on the planet that has a split tongue other than the snake, the reptilian. They got a split tongue, as far as I know. There may be a few other creatures out there, like lizards and stuff like that, that may have a split tongue. But by and large, it's reptilians that has the split tongue. Well, by and large, the white man has developed the same characteristic as the very creatures that I got through explaining to you about. The split tongue. Man talketh out of both sides of his mouth. They say one thing, but in reality, they do something totally different, or in a lot of cases, the very opposite of what they're talking about. And to think that our great nation has basically idiots running it, the way that it's been run now for the past 40 plus years, it breaks my heart as a true blue patriot of the American soil to think that this has went on for this length of time before people such as myself is standing up and saying enough is enough. But then they want to gripe and complain about an uprising that happened January the 6th, but yet now they don't understand why the uprising happened. But yet now we're $32+ trillion in debt. Our roads is falling apart. Our bridges is falling apart. Our schools is falling apart. Drugs is taking this country over. Suicides, mass shootings, illegal immigrants. So whenever I ask the question, what the hell is going to happen to us? I mean that literally, not figuratively. What is going to happen to the American people? As Ronald Reagan talked about, that time capsule, that if we was to bury the time capsule in 1988, whenever all this occurred, which is now going on 35 years, so we've done burn up a quarter of a century on this time capsule ideal. So in another 65, 70 years from now, whenever we look at one another and we dig this time capsule up, what is going to be our explanation towards allowing for this situation to have gotten disproportionately out of hand? And that's what the people that has been exposed to my message in the past 30 plus years, especially since 1988, they need to start asking themselves the question, whenever you stand in front of your Creator and you know because of your actions that it has caused the devastation of the American land, what is going to be your explanation towards how come you didn't do what you should have done, or how come you did do what you done that allowed for this to occur? That's what our ancestors is going to be asking us. And that's what our children below us and our children's children and our grandchildren are going to be asking us, is how come y'all let this happen? And I hope to God in the question, whenever you fill in the blanks, that you have some really, really good answers. Because if you don't, it very well may be the death of you. And whenever I say the death of you, I'm not talking about your physical death. We're all going to go through a physical death. All of us are going to go through some form of a physical death, even if we get caught up in the second coming. But the death that I'm talking about is the spiritual death, the hereafter death, the death that it talks about in the Bible. Whenever a great fire fell from Jerusalem that consumed them. You claim that you care about yourselves. You claim that you care about your soul. You claim that you care about where you spend eternity at. My advice would be you need to start acting like it. You need to start acting like it. Rather than say you care, you need to actually show me that you care. Because for the past 30 some odd years, I haven't seen no works coming from the so-called church communities that has proven to me that they truly do care. Oh, they care about their own selfish greed while they're living here upon the planet towards softening their own lives, living in great wealth and luxury, and letting the homeless and the poor and the demented suffer that much more. Oh, they care about their own lives towards their selfishness. We see that on a day-to-day level. But it's those that go to church and say that they care about their own salvation and their own souls that I know their lifestyles are not lining up according to the teachings of the Bible. And I know that they know this. They cannot be that deceived. The preachers and the teachers, the evangelists and the theologians, the priest and those that works in the commissioner and with the church, I know that they know this.
Amazing. Finally, Bridge, what about the chances of moving towards the kind of more competitive environment that Matt was just outlining there? I mean, we've talked about this. There are companies like Anduril, for example, not well known like the kind of Raytheons and all the rest of the world. Anduril, a new startup that seems to be doing very well at kind of breaking into this market.
Right. Well, I think there is a real opportunity.
My son, I'm going to break in real quick right here. My son brags about him being a member of the Knights Templars, which is basically a stem off from Masons. It's a stem off from 5 or 6 other big secret organizations that basically have the money, that are supposed to be in control towards having the power. I don't care what organization you belong to. There's not going to be a rescue pertaining to your organization, no matter what organization that you belong to, that's going to rescue you whenever all this turns belly up. And I have said this before, it's almost like watching a slow motion train wreck. That you can see it right in front of your very eyes, but there's absolutely nothing that the one-man pony show can do about it. In the meantime, I still get ridiculed. In the meantime, they take their blame that should be diverted or pinpointed towards themselves, and they point it towards somebody like me, towards wanting to say that I'm a false prophet, or I'm a false teacher, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. In other words, I've already been judged and condemned. I've already been shot plumb out of the saddle before I get out of the gate good. And that's exactly what has been happening for the past 40 plus years since I made mention to the White House about the end time ending events that has been prophesied for thousands and thousands of years. I have made my story pretty well public out there that I can validate pertaining to the paperwork. And a big part of it is legal paperwork. It ain't just something that I've sat down and scribbled upon. It's actually come from courthouses and hospitals and courts and etc. that I can validate. In the meantime, I watch this slow motion train wreck.
Across the political spectrum, people you mentioned, Jim Banks, or on the left, Ro Khanna, who would be in favor of promoting these kind of policies. And I think part of it is maybe the deal is we will spend more money on defense, as I'm sure we need to, but in ways that don't just ratify the status quo. That Matt has kind of very eloquently laid out why that's inadequate, and I can see it more from the defense side. The results are inadequate, and we can see what people are saying. I mean, I think Jake Sullivan himself said that his number one priority for the next couple of years is the defense industrial base, but we know it's unsatisfactory. So there are new entrants, there are new players. Some of them are already out there, but really it should be percolate throughout the economy, because we're going to need a skilled industrial base, welders, all these kinds of things, a civilian shipbuilding industry. So I think there's a lot of potential political overlap if we can find it in the kind of direction, Steve, that you've been talking about for some time.
Yeah. Fantastic. Look, this is the kind of actual smart policy conversation we hope that they're having. I'm very happy that we can have it with both of you here tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay with us. Much more up ahead.
I hate to say it, but I've reached a point in my personal life, especially for the past 8 years since I've come back to Northwest Tennessee and been treated the way that I've been treated, plus the loss of a brother, because of people treating the Jackson estate, the Jackson family name, the way that the Jackson family name has been treated. But I've reached a state similar towards how that whenever this outbreak first happened over in Ukraine, I started calling up various people about some pills that would fight off radiation. And one of the women that I talked to over in Trenton somewhere that run a National Guard armory or whatever it was, supply armory over there, questioned me and said, "Let me ask you a question." I go, "Okay." She goes, "Do you really want to be the last?" And she didn't have to explain anything more about these iodine pills that I was asking about. And I thought for a second, well, you know what? You make a good point, don't you? She said, because if you do, you're going to see a lot of suffering and a lot of remorse and a lot of pain. I have went through so much pain and so much agony pertaining to how that my fellow man has turned against me. How that I have seen this corruption, this lukewarmness coming from the church society. That I've come to that conclusion that do I really want to be the last in going out in obviously a very, very painful, cruel, slow death? And the answer to that question is no, I do not. Because it has reached the point of me fighting this fight that I have been fighting now for 30 plus years without having any supporters to back me, to fight in the same corner that I'm fighting in for peace and justice and utopia and a righteous, holy, eternal God that it talks about in the Bible. It has reached the point that the fight is no longer worth fighting. And now it's time to throw in the towel at the age of soon to be 62. Because they have brought this obviously upon to themselves. I have worn out my body. I've worn out 3 or 4 automobiles. I've spent well over probably $500,000 in addition to the money that I've had to sacrifice, in addition to the time that has been stolen from me because of being persecuted the way that I've been persecuted pertaining to this message. Well over $500,000 that my bank account right now could be fat and plump, that I wouldn't have to worry about living in a little 2000 model Fleetwood RV trailer that I basically bought for about $3,000 in North Carolina and had it shipped over here that I'm still living in today. I wouldn't have to worry about living in something like this. You know why? Because I could have went out here and bought a nice 2,600 square foot home and lived in it just as pleasurably as everybody else and had a nice car rather than drive a piece of you-know-what that looks like a beater that not even the dealerships want to work on whenever I pull it up there and tell them that I need something done. Well, we can't work on this car. Well, why? Well, look at it. It should have went to the dump. This is what my people think of me. This is how much they think of me towards treating me the way that they have treated me. And don't think that I'm the only preacher or minister or messenger that has went through this type of adversity, because you can look at Billy Graham. I'm talking about Billy Graham Sr. Whenever he was persecuted the way that he was persecuted in Palaca, Florida. And for years and years and years, even after his ministry obtained a national status, the man still drove around in old clunkers. And as far as I know, lived in a very moderate lifestyle. He didn't have jets. He didn't have sailboats. He didn't have millions or billions of dollars stashed away in all these hidden bank accounts. So don't say that I'm the only one, because I'm not the only one that has been persecuted for Christ's namesake. And I'm sure I won't be the only one, because the Bible teaches us that we will be hated for his namesake. And that the law is going to fulfill itself towards they hated him for no cause. Because in the spirit realm, the Luciferian Lucifer knew that if he defiled God, that if he rejected towards being that in which what he had been created for, that it was nothing more than a death sentence by doing so. So in reality, whenever Jesus said, "Let it be known in their law, for they hated me without a cause," that's exactly what had occurred. Now, from a worldly standpoint, we look at that and say, well, he done what he done because out of greed or selfishness or pride, or he felt like that he was getting the bad end of the stick, or we look at that from a worldly standpoint. We want to excuse the unexcusable towards the things that he has done. Well, see, that's what Satan wants to place into our minds and into our hearts towards being lenient on true justice. Because in the spirit world, that hasn't changed and will never change. In the spirit world, whenever the Bible says that to whom much is given, much is required, there is a zillion trillion times more expected out of accountability issues pertaining to their world, more so than our world, because in his world, or its world, it knew that whenever it made the decision towards being defiant against the kingdom of God, that it was a death sentence. And should have been a death sentence for us. But because of the love that the Heavenly Father had for us, and he knowed how that we was being bamboozled by this evil demonic spirit towards deceiving us and tricking us and doing what it was doing, that's whenever he assigned his son, Jesus Christ, to come down here to prove that the lifestyle that he expected out of all of us, first of all, could be lived towards a sinless life. Second of all, in Jesus' teachings, Christ says quite clearly that if we believe in him sincerely and live to the best of our ability to be that in which what Christ was, that we would be accepted into the kingdom by hearing the Father say, "Well done, well done." Only through and by the blood of Christ. Not through the sacrifice of a goat, not through Allah or Muhammad or some of these other crazy mythologies, not through the Wiccans, not through Hinduism, not through voodooism. And don't get me wrong, whenever I talk about Allah and etc., I realize that there's some people out there that truly preach and teach and believe in the Savior's name towards it being what it is in that fashion. I'm not talking about those people. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people that has turned religion into a game. And you can turn religion into a game by being a Baptist or a Methodist or a Church of Christ or a Jehovah's Witness or a Church of God or an Assembly of God or a United Pentecostal or a Catholic. You can turn any and all the above into a game that basically is nothing more than a front. Once more, the front has played itself out. Just as the Bible talks about that your sins would find you out. America's sins is finding them out. This generation of people that is going to stand in front of the very same Maker that our ancestors is going to stand in front of, and the same people below us pertaining to our children and our children's children are going to stand in front of us, and we're going to get it from both sides. We're going to get it from our ancestors in shaking their heads and their fists by asking us, why did you do this? And then on the other hand, pertaining to our children in their generations, they're going to be doing the same thing. Why did you allow for this to happen? And there's going to be some very, very serious questions asked that's going to demand some very, very serious answers. And if the people, by and large, that could have had something to do towards changing our end results here in America, if they could have and they didn't, I'm just afraid that our laws that we claim are fair and just and decent pertaining to us being a civilized society are not going to line up the same whenever it comes to the laws of God. And those same people are going to be given that last and final chance. And in that last and final chance will be the stepping stone to their very lives of going through that second death. Now you claim once more that you care about your life, which I'm sure you care about your physical life pertaining to the things that you have to experience during the time that you're experiencing them in this life. I'm sure that you care about this life. But for those on a religious scale that claim that they care about their hereafter life, I'm in awe towards wondering, are they really that deceived in thinking that God is going to be this lenient towards allowing for these actions in regarding accountability issues just to go unnoticed or unanswered? And I promise you, the way that I understand the Bible, to the fullest extent of God's law, not our law, but God's law, there's going to be a lot of people that's going to have a rude awakening once they do get to the hereafter land by expecting one thing, but are going to be receiving something totally different. Now, I don't know if the devil has blinded people out of ignorance, and I don't know if the people that are blinded are intentionally blinded towards playing games. I can't answer that. But what I can say is that whenever it comes to accountability issues, whenever Jesus himself said, let it be known in their law, the law of the wicked, that they hated me for no cause. It's going to be hands down in how ignorant, stupid, how just absolutely asinizing it was for the demonic world to do what they done in challenging the heavenly kingdom, knowing that there wasn't going to be no pardon and that they would be bringing a death sentence to themselves by doing what they done. God's laws don't change. The format of God's laws don't change. His accountability to those laws don't change. And if we think that they change, we're only, once more, deceiving ourselves, because it was the generation in Noah's era that thought that there was not going to be accountability issues. That was wrong. We see where other cultures, including the Egyptians with Moses, was wrong. We can see where one particular city called Sodom and Gomorrah, where they obviously didn't think that there was going to be any type of accountability issues. That was wrong. So are we going to walk down this same endless stupidity road by thinking that we're going to get by on blaming one another for our own inadequacies? Wrong. That's what they thought before us. That they're still going to go through their judgment the same as we're going to have to go through ours. And if we think that we're any less or greater or better than them, once more, we're only deceiving ourselves, because the laws of God changes not. God says it again and again throughout the Bible that I change not. His laws does not change. His accountability to those laws don't change. And the Luciferian Lucifer, the Antichrist, the false prophet, the Antichrist himself, knows this. Now, we can try to convince ourselves of otherwise, but it's only our own stupidity, because once we wind up in eternity, and it's not in the place of eternity where we thought that we was going to go, we have no one to blame but ourselves. Not each other. Not each other. That game will no longer be effective. You will have no one to blame but your actual self. As fire comes down that consumes them to bring their second death into existences, that will basically be a living, tormented hell by being separated from God Almighty for the rest of eternity. From the human perspective standpoint. Once more, from the spiritual standpoint, Satan has already created his own doom. Satan, the Lucifer that started the mutiny up in heaven, he's already sealed his own fate towards his own doom. What he's trying to do now is drag everybody else into that same arena. And if we're not smart enough to see that and identify that, we have no one to blame, not each other, but ourselves. Now, that's as clear and as plain and as straight as I know to tell it. And whenever the leadership of this great nation fails, it will fail upon to a generation that will be questioned very strongly pertaining to why. Why did you let this get in this type of trouble? Good luck to all of us. Want to say God bless America, and good luck to each and every one of us. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors. Heaven help us all. I ordinarily don't watch Fox News because of various things, but I felt like that this was necessary to put out, especially seeing what's going on right now with Russia, especially hearing the comments coming out of Russia pertaining to the Western world. I thought it was necessary to put out on my Facebook page pertaining to the nuclear activity. And if you'll read that in which what I put onto that, I think you will identify some of the horrors that the founder of the Windmill Ministries has had to go through in trying to spare and save its own people, the very people that turned its back on him, the very people that turned their back on Christ, the very entity that turned its back on Christ is still trying to rule the cosmos. And I got news for him. He's not going to rule the cosmos. Whenever it talks about that God's precious children, the meek, shall inherit the earth, pertaining to God's chosen, that's exactly what it means. But you're going to have to do it authentically and not do it in some sort of phony baloney way. Heaven help us all, and shalom.